Hi, it is Susan from Worldpeacefull, and sort of thought I'd talk about conflict transformation. I had an experience where I was feeling disappointed. There was someone, a good family friend, who was going to come visit and didn't because ran out of time, other things happening. And what I did was explored my process, which is pretty much the same as everybody's. When we get disappointed when people don't turn up, and then we think that they should, or they should make more of an effort. What I feel really grateful for is I do understand how to transform conflict, and it is powerful. And I thought I'd share with you how to transform conflict. There are real truisms that are coming out in the world today, and they are philosophical truths that teach us how to transform conflict, but not in a way that's sort of self-soothing. It's actually seeing the truth of a matter. Now, one of the most powerful things that I've ever learned is nobody is here to do anything to please me. They are unfolding their own lives in their own way, and I can't know what the best outcome should be. We can become self-oriented and say, well, this person should make an effort and come here. Clearly that person's not doing that. Something else is happening for them. It's not personal. But what I realise, and this is the technique I use, is they are meant to do what they're doing. The type of person that they are is who they are, and they're not here to turn up as I think they should. It's a really major mistake we make with people, is when we say that you should be this, you should be that. This is how we get into the arguing. This is how the projection happens, the negative projection onto someone, is that they're doing something you don't want, and therefore we blame them for not doing enough. And what I sort of said to myself, I went for a walk actually, it was good, and I said to myself, that person is exactly the way they're meant to be. Of course, I have a spiritual perspective, and I believe that those who turn up in your life are meant to be there in the way that they are, because there's something there for you to learn. If I feel a negative tension about something that I've created in my own mind on the basis of a should or a shouldn't, then that's my issue, not theirs. So no one can really disappoint me in truth. Only I can disappoint me by believing they should have behaved or done something differently. I'm the one who frames the context around right and wrong, and that is not true. Right and wrong is not true. And I say it in the sense of things that are meant to be the way they are. They turn up the way they turn up in reality. We can then project onto that reality like you would a picture screen and say it's good or it's bad, it's right or it's wrong. But again, going back to Byron Katie's work, who was a profound teacher, and I do always default back to her, she would say, the circumstances that have been created around you are perfect in respect of the evolution of who you are. So not that this person's done anything, they haven't, but we can concoct a whole story around what they should or shouldn't do. We can then go into the past and say they did this, they did that, to justify a prejudicial belief that we're projecting. So I went into a state of accepting what is and looking at it from a number of angles. I was actually doing a lot of work today, and I wouldn't have had time in any case if I was honest, And unconditional love means Can I love that person for whatever they choose, and it doesn't have to include me? The highest love is being happy that they're doing what makes them happy. It's not about them making me happy. That's need. And then I've been contemplating also Byron Katie's work where she says, God spare me from the desire for love, appreciation and approval. And I saw that because it was to do with, it's a family member in actual fact. So it's like it is about love. But it's not about them loving me. It's about me loving me. When I love me, then there's nothing that I need, right? And that's what self-love means. It means you're fulfilled. Nobody owes you, All our conflicts are concocted within our own minds. We imagine on the basis of should or shouldn't. It really is that powerful. It's why the questioning of thinking, this is why I'm saying this in my blogs too, what you resist persists, what you look at disappears. Our expectations are the beginning of our misery, because if someone falls short of what we have decided they should be doing, then that sort of changes the feeling towards the other. So you move from unconditional love is essentially what happens. Unconditional love is our natural state. It's not an ideal. Children are unconditionally loving. That's why they drop things very fast. Eckhart Tolle talks about the duck, that has a scrap in the pool, in its little pond with another duck, wah, wah, wah at each other, shake their wings, and then drop it. They go off, swimming off. There's no more conflict, but human beings are not the same. We resent, we hold grudges, we, ruminate, we feel guilt, we want to blame. It's got to be their fault. And predominantly in the negative type of culture that we've created, there's a lot more of that. So I might talk about warfare in my blogs because I'm a peacemaker, and I'm talking more about it these days because I think it's very important subject matter. Before, I wasn't really exploring that subject so much, but because of what I've seen in respect of Iraq and Afghanistan and the Balkans and Sudan, in Egypt, the Arab Spring, and in Cairo, all these little wars over in Africa, Congo, I think, are still undergoing conflict. When I look at that, I also see that we're having conflict on the day-to-day level within society, and it's wars as well. There's also wars within business. I read someone talking about they didn't call it a flank attack, they called it, I can't remember exactly the words they used now, but it was definitely military strategy in business. And it was a tactic that a business was using in order to undermine. In actual fact, it was to do with environmentalism. I was having a look at some of the think tanks because I found it quite interesting. Here in Australia, there was, a lot of discussion around right-wing extremism. There's also some silence around the attacks in New Zealand in respect of the Australian that was involved. There's a little bit of denial happening here where we're not jumping on the bandwagon quite so fast, which I found quite interesting. They were hammering on about it before. But this is the thing. Any violent act can happen from anybody, and it's no good placing a label over the top of it and making them the evil other when what we see in another is within ourselves. Anything that creates a division is planting the seeds of a future possible event which could be creating terror for someone else. What do they say? Take the log out of your own eye before you sit there and you blame others. In peace studies and conflict resolution, we talk about the finger that blames. There's 3 fingers pointing back at them. So if I go, your fault, you did it. 3 pointing back. This is why a lot of spiritual or religious traditions talk about not to judge people. Stand in their shoes and imagine, what that's like for them. So going back to that idea of the environmentalism and what was happening in Australia, there was a discussion around One Nation Party, and they were, stating that they prefer to put the Greens at the bottom of the how to vote card, and now it's One Nation because of their being caught out by Al Jazeera talking about, getting funding from the what is it? The National Rifle Association, NRA, in the US, which has KKK connections, according to Bowling for Columbine, so Michael Moore's film. That was made very clear with Charlton Heston, in actual fact. Michael tried to interview him. And there was, there's this sort of sense of great pride in, don't worry, this is the dog, great pride in superiority. It's fine. It barks at shadows, this dog. It's a very funny dog, actually. It's hilarious, in actual fact. I seem to be having all these really humorous dogs that I'm looking after. So going back to the environment, I just find it astounding that there's all these little wars going on. And as I was reading tonight, I'm finding out about the right-wing conservative fighting the environmentalism as somehow an enemy. And it's like, this is ridiculous. And it's all because of self-interest, because they don't want to relinquish any profit, Dog's barking. Sure. Come on, relax. Peace, dog, peace. Come here. It's all right. You don't have to defend the house. It's all good. I want to jump up on me in a minute. Hello, cutie. So I was marvelling at the undermining, the think tanks creating research studies in order to validate what they know to be. Wants to come up. Come here. Oh, look at this. I got a dog. This dog is such a baby. Oh, what? Hello. Now this dog apparently bites a lot. It has growled a few times, but has never bitten me, which is good. Apparently, this is a dog that's been badly treated. It was a rescue dog. And I found out from another lady just around here who was frightened to pat it. She said, last time I tried to pat it, it bit me. And I said, how long ago was that? Oh, she said, about 3 weeks ago. Me and the dog are really good friends. And it usually lies on its back. It likes its stomach being rubbed. So I'm working on healing it, give it lots of love, and I try to communicate with it, and it's very smart. It's incredibly intelligent. I've been really surprised. Oh, it's going to knock the computer over. You're not that smart. Knows what I'm saying, and I actually say to it when it growls, no, and I growl back at it. I go, no, and I do give it a consequence. Give it a consequence, which means you can't sit on my lap. And it loves that, so that's not easy. Could still growl again. I think it might even have a little mental health issue, because it might have been hurt. Were you hurt? Were you hurt by someone? I think you were. It's just hilarious. I chase it around the house. What I've discovered too, this is just an allude, I'll go back to what I'm talking about in a minute. What I've learned about dogs, they actually have really good senses of humour. House sitting's been good for me because I'm actually meeting a lot of animals, and I'm very loving towards animals. And they're like clowns. They're really funny. I go chasing it around the house and it chases me back. Gets its ball, drops it in my hand. It's that smart. And it plays. They're very, very playful. And I love that because the clown in me comes out immediately. It doesn't take much to get me into it. And I see them as little beings, you know. This dog is so amazing. They're really amazing if you really look at them, aren't you? Are you amazing? I think you are. It's talking to me. Could growl. It does snap. Anyway, I'm just going into the inner feeling. I am marvelling at the wars we all create, including my own. But thankfully, I have the presence of mind now to quickly question myself the minute I think life should be any different from what it is. So there's really no room in this type of philosophy that I'm living, which I believe is the true state of a human being. If you accept life as it turns up in the moment, what's to be sad about? Now, of course, I have a belief system where I believe our lives have been formulated to a certain degree. It's not to say there's not random chance in it, there is. So if I'm able to accept on some level that there is an order, I don't even really like the word order. It's more, let me just go still for a second, get a better fix on the word. Feeling I'm getting as allowance. I had the word picture that came immediately to my mind. So life is like a picture. Maybe it's a pixel. Many pixels. Sort of formulates around you, like every day is created, isn't it? They say. The next moment you don't know what's going to happen. There's so many dynamic events going on around us on many, many levels. People are having all sorts of experiences at the same time around the world. So what my feeling is if I can just trust that things are exactly the way they're meant to be, is a better word than order. Because order tends to suggest a certain pattern, but as if there is some sort of preconceived idea of what an order is. If we go into logic, it would be it's this first, then this, then that. Whereas I see life as multi-dimensional in a lot of ways, and there's a lot of things happening on a lot of levels, and it would be seen as more of a vertical form of reality, I think. So what that means is fully accepting the moment, and on some level you've chosen it in order for you to learn or to remember something would be more accurate about yourself or what you're here for, or just simply life, you know. It really is a personal journey for everybody, no matter who you're with, even if you're with a family or on your own or what have you. It's a personal journey because you're with yourself your entire life. So you're the one who decides what you make of it. You can make it an amazing experience full of wonder, or you can make it a sad story where things didn't work out or you felt some sense of failure. I don't feel any failure at all. I'm growing all the time, and it's because my objective in life is to grow, you know. And I remember that at age 28, I think I was 28. I said, I'm here for the experience. I'm not going to go for the money. And I never regretted that, and that's what took me to England, where I spent a couple of years. I was married at the time. That would not have unfolded for me had I gone for the money. I would have gone on to probably buy a house, probably had a child. But instead I chose to go to England. I had met Edward de Bono. He's one of the top 50 thinkers in the world, apparently. I don't know who calculates that. How do you know that that he's the top 50th thinker? Because that's what they write in his biography. So we've basically gone right around the world. We've talked to 6 billion people, and we've figured he is the top 50th. Who's the we that decides that? So clearly he's not the top 50th thinker if you really think about it. That's not possible. And how do we then decide the type of thinking that's top? Is it because of the approval that people give it? Is it the outcome by using his tools and techniques? So you can see it's marketing, can't you? That's perception. So I actually met with him. He was one of the reasons why I went to Britain, because I'd met him here in Australia, and he let me come to his talk. This was when I was studying economics, and I basically wrote to him and I made a cheeky letter and basically couldn't understand why he didn't have scholarships for people who didn't have any money. That's one of the trends in my life. I'm really good at no money, but I'm a great creator of bringing things to me, so I don't actually need it, because he invited me to come for free. It was $500 a head, I think, $400 to $500. So I was critiquing the amount, and he let me come, and as a result we met, and I gave him a boomerang. We had a debate. I think I've talked about this on one of my videos before, but we had a debate in the break, and I have written about this quite a lot in my blog too. Essentially, if my memory serves me correctly, and I could be wrong because it's been many years now, I would have been, how old? 24, 25, 26. I was about 26 when I met him, maybe 25. So I'm 54 now, so it's a good 27 years ago, 28 years ago. Anyway, we had coffee in the break, and he sort of put this scenario to me of 10 doors. There probably was a lot more to it than what I'm remembering now, but this was the essence. And he was essentially talking about what's the probability of getting a goat behind the door. I said 50-50. Now everyone else would say, no, it's 1 in 10, because we'd be using probability theory. My inner feeling was I saw it as on-off, 0-1. You either get it or you don't. And very much it's in alignment with the philosophy I'm sharing with you, which is it's meant to be or it's not. Now, if I was to take it further with the law of attraction, and I was able to convince myself that I would stand in front of the door with a goat, it probably would happen. So I'm saying it's either meant to be or it's not. And he disagreed with me. And I said, no, we'll have to agree to disagree there. But years later, I just might quickly state that, okay, that was in Brisbane. When I was in London, I met with him in Piccadilly Circus. And his room was lined with books. If you can imagine, books all over the floor. And I just looked at him. I thought, he's into books. This is a man who's developed lateral thinking and obviously derived his systems thinking from all these books that he's read. So he's a scholar. But what I liked about him was that I felt a sense of equality with him. I definitely got that sense. This was in Piccadilly. We sat and had a few drinks and talked, because I was trying to get work in London, and a little opportunity opened up for Austrade, I think the Australian Trade Commission. I made contact with a journalist who'd been with Triple M in Sydney, Jonathan Coleman. People may know him. I think it was Jonathan. Yeah, it was Jonathan. And I sent him a letter, and he did open a door, but it closed pretty quickly. I'm really good at the closing doors. Not even revolving doors. I don't even get in the door. I might just add, I also had an opportunity with The Economist magazine. I wrote I got the opportunity. I wrote something very creative to the editor. I sort of made my CV like, if you can imagine, a few layers. There was a few layers to the CV, which I'd done with dividers. It was a little bit lateral the way I approached it, and the editor was intrigued, and I just finished economics. But what I did, and I laugh at myself because I am like this, rather than just write a standard piece on economics, I mean, I'd just done 3 years of economics, so I knew how to write an essay. I decided to innovate. And he wrote back and said, you don't have a beginning and a middle and a conclusion. And that was quite deliberate. I just chose to write in a different way. It was a more holistic form of writing, but obviously the door closed. But in a way, it opened to my life. So we can say that, oh, you should have given him what he wanted. That was a great experience to work for the economist unit. It was the economics unit. The economist unit, I think it was called. Great opportunity, would have opened doors in London, who knows where it would have gone from there. But I don't have any regret whatsoever, because what the door was that I was actually opening was to my own self-determination to not be beholden to career or fame or, prosperity in that sense. I was quite okay with not getting it. And I really noticed that about myself. And this was at a time when I needed a job in London. I'd been doing some temping there, but I eventually left. I did actually work as a market analyst in London for a bit, for, a business, business to business type market research. So yes, Edward was a very nice guy. I liked him, very down to earth. Certainly wasn't full of himself. But when we talked about getting me a job, both of us were going laterally at it. And he'd say something, I'd say, I thought of that. He'd say this, and I'd say, I thought of that. He wasn't really able to help me, but it was nice that he gave his time. And, apparently he was running late. I was going to say I made him late, but I didn't really. He just forgot time, and he was supposed to be giving a talk somewhere. And he quickly gave me a kiss on both cheeks, and off he went out the door. I met him many years later in Melbourne too. I sort of felt to connect with him, and I didn't know he was coming to Melbourne, but he did. We did meet up and have dinner, and I met some of his friends. I certainly don't envy the life of fame, not at all. I wouldn't want to be famous. The only proviso I would have on fame is if I felt it would serve others. If my, standing, in a sense, enabled others to find themselves or give them some hope. I talk a lot about real hope in my work. Real hope is a model, and it's a real one. It is all about values. So I'm going back to war in my mind right now because I'm feeling the connections. You have to disconnect to be able to harm someone. And no matter how much we dress it up as defense or heroism or whatever, ultimately you have to hurt someone and kill them or maim them or traumatize them or terrorize them in order to achieve an objective, which is to win. This issue of winning is a real big problem that we're facing in the world. It's this competitiveness. It's been argued for many, many years that this is what, is the grist for the mill, which, makes us better. We become more aspiring towards things, or, we have to force our way to get what we want. But I see that we need to move to a higher level because the world is becoming unstuck now, economically speaking, and psychologically speaking. There's a lot of mental health because people are not in harmony with who they are and their community's breaking down. It's actually the human bonds that are breaking down. People they don't feel a sense of security. They try very hard to hold on to their security through their relationships, through their work and so forth. And they're very frightened by what they're seeing on television, because it's just, I mean, I'm just amazed what's being, projected out through. I'm actually looking at the TV here. Projected out through the television. There's too much. It's almost like no holes barred. You can see pornography is starting to move into the digital reality. And this is coming from mindsets who think it's fine. It's not okay for children. The gratuitous violence is not okay for children. What we put into our consciousness deepens the fear. So going back to values, empathy is a very big one. What you do to another returns to self is a truism. It really does. So when I'm writing this in my blog, I mean it. What you put out returns. It's like a boomerang. If you know anything about Australia, the Aborigines used to chuck boomerangs, they come back. They catch them. It'd be interesting to know what they did and why they did that, whether they were actually hunting the birds. But it comes back. So the point there being, there's even on a deeper level, if we're all one, which we are, one way or another we're going to experience what we've done to someone. But again, what I've said in previous videos, it's not a form of punishment, it's awakening. We tend to learn best through experience. We're not very good at learning theoretically. This is why I've talked about the cyber reality, because it is an unreal world. It's not an experiential. So for those who have been monitoring me, because they are concerned about critiquing the IT rollout, my critique is coming from a very genuine place, and it's coming from my experience. I've been a teacher of peace, and I am experiential in my life. I'm living the life in a lot of levels. So when I was teaching, what I know is that you have to embed knowledge through not the Internet of Things, but through experiences. This is the emotional, physical experiencing of life. Now, if I was to put that into an IT term, an experiential aspect would be typing on a keyboard. You feel your fingers on the keys. You're experiencing the device. And of course, I know that psychologists would have gone right into the social emotional, and they have, to make that device more personable. But the human interaction is very, very powerful for human development. And I know this, having been a clown on the streets, having had thousands of interactions with people on a very social, emotional level. I've also seen the healing in that one-on-one experience. Even to walk past a person and to smile at someone is healing. But we're becoming detached, and that's what my concern is, and that's why I am feeling inspired very much to talk about IT. I've been on computers my entire life. So I've been on the computers 34 years. So I'm not a novice with computers. I may not be a programmer or into code, which is becoming very trendy. So that's formulating the algorithms, and must be very exciting. I did try to put myself in the shoes of programmers. Must be very exciting to develop programs. I think it would be exciting, and I guess it would give you a sense of unlimited creative ability. But the other end of that is the user of it, and that's where I'm looking. You have to bring in a sense of responsibility in what you're doing. Certainly, I've read about those high up within the IT industry in Silicon Valley who've had concerns that it could get out of control, and it will. Because like anything, our civilization, it's not just with IT, it's with a lot of things, a lot of technologies. Technologies have run ahead of us, but emotionally we're not caught up. Responsibility is not just a disciplined statement. It's really sitting with, I've created something, what's the impact on not just a few people, but we might be dealing with millions of people. There's a massive responsibility in that. And that becomes karma, spiritually speaking. What you put out comes back. I mean, this is a universal type language I'm talking about. This is not program language, this is universal. So you have to bear that in mind. It's consequences. It's like if you've been in a war situation and many people have been killed, well, how do you live with that? What about all the relationships that break up because one person sits on a computer? I know someone whose marriage broke up, and these were older people. He couldn't get off the computer. So the addictive properties of using computers has all sorts of implications for people's lives, who they're with, whether they stay with that person. What about the children? What if they break up? This person ends up being a single parent. Children have a completely different life. And that's all come from a decision that was made to produce an app or something. And you might say, well, it's got nothing to do with me. It's out of my hands. Well, no, I'm telling you, it connects to you. And I'll give you an example. I've written this in my blog, talked about when I was, I've had a few, quite a few offerings of work in respect of market research. One of which was a CSIRO, which I've talked about before, commercialising scientific technology, interestingly enough. So I could have moved into that world. I have written about this, and this is a true story. This was a real opening, a real possibility for me to take off in my work. I see it as a test in my life. It was a test. What was being offered to me was prestige, status, not that good of money at the time, but it could have produced better money later on. Now that week, my partner, he was given a metal sculpture. If you can imagine, it was just sort of a triangular rod, if you like, at the base. So it was like a little pyramid type steel base. With that, there were all these little prongs, as I call it, with a little twist at the end. All these little prongs. Now, what that sculpture was plant life. So you whack that sculpture and it reverberates, and you can see the plants moving. But the twist at the top was the double helix. And I couldn't believe it when he got it. And I just went, I've never in my life seen a sculpture like that, and I never saw one again. See, I see life in a different way. I really do take note of what turns up. So I was grappling with the GMO issue, had discussions with the management there, because I would have to commercialise genetically manipulated organisms. Didn't sit with me. I thought, well, the implications of this is I am participating in a situation where I'm assisting or facilitating the possibility of more plant life having its genetics changed to, profit business interests, and that was the issue. Because business is not in alignment with nature, you see. They're looking to make money. They're not interested in whether there's a knock-on effect, whether there's cross-pollination, in neighbouring monocultures, if you like. What does it do to the food chain? How does it impact insects? How does it affect temperature? What if there's a keystone species that depends on that plant that's genetically modified in order to repel certain insects which this other species might live off? See, there's iterations around this that are multiplicity of iterations. So if we were to put it into programming language, you can imagine a decision tree. Taking this decision, this is an implication. What's the knock-on effect there? I'm actually drawing it now. What's the knock-on effect there? But how can you model a complex natural system How can you model it through the seasons? You can come up with certain mathematical iterations, but what about what we don't know, which is a lot? Still species on the planet we haven't even found. So that's the point I'm making. It's like you've got to go a bit deeper with all this stuff. It's not just about the money. And the thing is, we get blinded by the greed. And off we go, and we all join what we call in conflict resolution glee clubs. They're called glee clubs. This is where you get people around you who agree with you. Someone critiques you, that's the enemy. Oh, I'm not hanging out with that one. Don't feel good with that. What does he know? What does she know? Got to face life squarely. Sit with, okay, this is a scenario. Can I live with that? You have to do it because you've got to live with it. It's actually for you that you do it. It's not about just trying to, believe something in order to feel good about it. There's a lot of immaturity around that. When you're dealing with global change, you have to be extremely mindful because, as I said, what you put out comes back. So CSIRO, I had to reject that job and I had $20 in my bank account. I've talked about that. That was the test. You're going to go for the money? I went, no. My partner at the time was going, what? Go for it. I went, I can't. It's unethical. People go, oh, don't worry about the ethics, just take the money. No, you have to consider the ethics. I know this absolutely, 100%. I know it's important. Why? Because I have to live with me. Now, if I did that, then I could say to others, oh, well, turn a blind eye. Don't worry about it. We all do it. Everyone does it. Let's do it. I'm not on that path. I'm very much working along the lines of, does this sit with me? Can I live with me? Will this harm someone? That does matter. Another case that I've talked about again on the blog was with an RSL actually, and it was to do research into gambling. And I'd already worked for this RSL and done another survey. So really, the work that I'd done is not unlike, although it's nothing to the bulk of data that's being picked up by big data. But my work was gathering in information, profiling, demographics. But I go deep in what I do. I'm not a superficial person at all. When I ever do research, I always do qualitative and quantitative together because I need to feel out the truth in the matter. I really do take the work very thoughtfully. So when I was, putting together my work, I'm really looking at solving a problem here. So I look at my hypothesis. What's the scenario here that's being tested? Then I open up to the universe because I don't want to contain the universe within a survey. I'm allowing information to come to me to give me the true picture. I was a good market analyst. I have had comments from people I've worked with. It's because I have a very inquiring mind and I care about truth. So I was very straight. It was very much like standing on a balance beam was the way I would articulate it. I was very, very careful not to bias myself one way or the other. I wanted to hear the voices. I wanted to hear what they had to say or read what they were writing. Or, if we did research, we might have interviewers. There is error. I was always managing error. So I had to be careful not to jump to conclusions, not to overemphasize particularly powerful voices. So if we were to put this paralleling to algorithms, what they're searching for, you can end up with, this is massive amount of data, and I've even been contemplating how on earth you're going to seriously come to some conclusion with it. You've then got the analyst trying to work it out. They're coming in with all their filters, their biases, We got keywords going out there. Obviously, it's going to pull back a whole heap of stuff, and then you're going to say, oh, look, it's everywhere. It's not. You've just pulled out of that universal sample words. You don't know the people involved, particularly if you're doing audio and all that sort of stuff. You don't know who's involved. You don't know if it's in jest. They might be joking. They might have been angry and just blurted something out, and then suddenly there's a profile on them to be watched. This is what the concern is around all of this. These are very valid concerns because people get it wrong. And I know as a market analyst, easily we can get it wrong. We're human. And it's all very well to say, well, we'll create AI and AI will advance itself. It's not human. It doesn't have that sixth sense. It will never have the sixth sense because that's the God particle, they call it. That's why I go into stillness. As if I was AI technology with a whole heap of logical routines, patterns, algorithms that have programmed in a limited range of possibilities, because you're not going to know the infinite range. It doesn't have the ability to tune in like that. We can try and emulate God, but we're not in the awareness of God. We're certainly an aspect of it, and that's why we're doing what we're doing. And I do see that. I see parallels from the oneness type of perspective, everything being interconnected, to the computer type connectivity. I can see that. I've talked about in my blog 5D, the IT area is talking 5G. The infinite possibility is very much within the oneness perspective. The infinite iterations would be in the IT area. There's the idea of full spectrum dominance, which I've talked about on my blog, where there is an intent behind it to control through data. From the oneness perspective, it very much is the opposite. It's full spectrum allowance in recognition of a higher intelligence that some are not feeling because they're disconnected. So they might say, it's not there, I can't feel it. Well, it is there. You may not feel it, but I can tell you it's there. That higher intelligence, I typically go into the stillness in order to tap in, which is inherent within every human being, by the way. I don't have any special gifts. It's just that I'm open-minded and open to it. I receive that as a form of insight. That's what insight means. I notice in the IT area they talk about co-creation. That's come from probably the law of attraction, I would say. And then they saying, manifest it, we'll just talk it up. It's going to happen. You can't stop it. This is creating on that level. But I can only go into my inner feeling and say that it won't work because I just know it. I do know it. I know human nature. But there will be destructive aspects to it if the AI gets out of control. Then we've got ourselves a real problem. The Matrix was a kind of a prophetic or predictive film, if we use your language. In the oneness perspective, we're not interested in predicting anything. We just live in the moment because that's where the reality is, you see. There's no need to predict in order to control, in order to create this sense of order from chaos. You can never do it. For a time it may work, but I know ultimately it won't work. It never has worked and it never will because it's not the nature of humans. Despite even some intentions around the merging of artificial intelligence with humans, what do they call it? Transhumanism. What I see that as is trying to create superhuman powers, which is very much along the lines of the oneness, which is to tap into that higher power. So I think there's parallels between this. What I see is different realities, seeing what the world could be. And that is the way of it. And I do see that. It's meant to be. It is what it is. It's happening. But the predictive and control type of aspect to it is, all I can say is good luck with that one. And I do mean it. Good luck with it. Most people can't even control their kids, People can't control their partners. They can't control their work because life is dynamic. It's always changing. It's literally always changing. And the moment there becomes an awareness, because we are part of the universe, this is not just here on Earth. Once an awareness sparks and you go, that's not for me, the engines of creation change again. So yes, we are in transitional times, but I think humanity is going to make a big leap forward. And I don't believe it's in the technological stream, even though I do think that is happening very fast. And I've been fairly overwhelmed by what I'm seeing. But that's the nature of greed. When people think money's in it, they just go on that bandwagon very fast. But then there are many other people on the earth who aren't on the bandwagon, who are seeking a better world for what meets their needs, not for their energy to meet the needs of others. So it's quite a dynamic clashing up, really. We're in interesting times for sure. And certainly from my perspective, I really believe everything's meant to be. So similarly to the scenario I talked about at the very beginning of this with the family member, I can say that person should be showing up in a certain way in order for me to be happy. But what I know is they should be turning up the way they're turning up. So the same applies to the IT industry as well. It is what it is. It's going to flush up things that people are going to reflect on, and they're going to decide whether this is me or not, whether they resonate or not. So it's meant to be, and I can see that. I can see that it's going to be very interesting to see what comes from all of this. But my ultimate interest would be somehow we all come together. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could use or utilise technology not as a dominant paradigm, but in service of that bringing us together? And that's where I think Facebook was really great. I really loved the concept of it. I was very disappointed when I realised there was more behind it, particularly with the data gathering. That was a great disappointment. And I just shook my head and just thought, what is going on in this world? Why can't you just produce a platform, help the people come together? It's like there's this constant tension around the fear of empowerment of civil society. There's all these divisions that are manifested through communism and capitalism because you don't want social organisation, which is what I believe that's about, as distinct from property ownership. But I guess leaning back into Buddha, which is what I often say, it is what it is. Those clashes were meant to happen. We're all on a learning curve. There is no enemy. There's just inner work to be done. And I know the inner peace is the key. In fact, all the world's problems would be solved definitely if everyone found their way to remember inner peace. That's where the real calmness is. I'm still learning. I'm not there yet, but I at least have a framework around it in the sense that I know, and it's a knowing. I know that there's no mistakes. And I would say from a peace perspective to those who have taken a lot of interest in my blog now, because of the controversial stuff I'm bringing up, I'm doing it because I'm into truth. I'm also facing things that I have had fear around and learning my voice, to hear my voice. That's why I said I don't mind if I'm not popular. I'm not interested. I'm not doing it for accolades or popularity. I'm doing it to hear my voice, because our voices have been suppressed for so long. I'm learning. I want to know about my world. I always have. That's why I went around the world. I wanted to know. Because I love this world. And I deeply love the people. Tonight, I'll just say very briefly and then I'll finish. There was an amazing film tonight which you might want to check out on the net. It's called The Diviner, Water Diviner. It's an Australian actor whom I know well but can't think of his name. And it was about Gallipoli because we've got Anzac Day happening tomorrow. Anzac means Australian New Zealand Army Corps. That's what it means. So it harks back to when we fought, or we, see, this is nationalism. I'm going to be more accurate. People who lived here, who fought in Gallipoli, which is in Turkey, against the Turks. Apparently 2,000 Australians lost their lives, but there were 7,000 Turks. And so people keep celebrating this. I have to say I don't feel celebration about war at all. And this film was really sensitive, you know. This guy, he was a farmer and he was looking for his sons. He actually went to Gallipoli. I don't know if it's a true story, but he was a water diviner because he was out in the bush. Well, he was probably more out in the desert, actually. He used to deal with 7-year droughts, he was saying, and have to try and find water. And I know the Indigenous people are very good at it. Apparently, things to do with ants. There's honey ants where they can get moisture from the honey ants, which are underneath the hard surface. I've been out and around Australia, and I tell you, it's vast. It's vast. And I have great admiration for the Indigenous that they survived 50,000 years here. We wouldn't last a week. It's very hot, very sparse, very flat in parts, very flat. It's incredible. So he went to Gallipoli as a story, and the British were trying to get him to go, and the Australian guy was trying to get him to go. Because it was just after the war. So there was a lot of bodies, and it was an excavation site at that time. They were digging them up, trying to relocate their name tags. And there was a beautiful Turkish man there who was assisting them, and he was being treated with great respect. He was also very respectful, and I really like that because it's like, can we learn that from war? Anyway, he was able to sense where his boys were. He had 2 boys there that died, and there was another one that he found later that lived. But I remember in the film when he dropped to his knees in recognition of his boy's death, and he was being antagonised by another guy to hate the Turk. It was egging him on. And he went for him. But there was great grief in him, and I cried as well. I cried a lot. And I cried for everyone that's, really suffered. The mothers, I was thinking of the mothers in Syria. Oh, dog's hitting, dude. Might growl at me in a minute. Be nice. Anyway, I really cried, for the people, the soldiers. Because the scene that really got me was when one of the brothers got his face blown off, and they showed it. And the other brother was screaming in agony, and the third brother was in between the 2 of them, lying on the ground. It was really violent, and I was just, they showed scenes, try not to knock over my laptop. They showed scenes of, a sort of almost like a makeshift trench, where the Turks and the Australians were fighting, and it was just, the violence was just, I was just going, oh my God, can you imagine? It's just murder after murder after murder. One person murders someone here and they go for 7 years. There they were just murdering whomever. They don't even know who they are. And it was hand to hand, looking into the eyes of each other, How can you do that? Because someone has told him. He said there was a point in the film where the farmer made friends with the Turk and they were on the journey to find his son, his other son. The other son lived. And they were saying, were you after property? And he goes, no, we've got plenty of land. We were fighting for principle. And he's going, you're fighting for principle? You didn't even get anything out of it? Big message for Australians in that. And often we were the cannon fodder at the front, mate. That's how smart we were. We let them. We were innocent, actually. As young boys are, they're innocent. That's why people are not for war, because they can see the futility of it. And it's people's children. It's like, can you imagine the poor mothers and fathers when they lose a child, or the brothers and sisters, how they feel? They never see them again. So that was really full on. And he ended up falling in love with a Turkish woman. She had a little boy, and there was love for him there. And his son wasn't going to leave. The dog's just licking the computer. The son wasn't going to leave Turkey. He had to shoot his brother. That was the trauma he was carrying, because his brother asked him to kill him because he was in agony. And it just destroyed him. He loved his brother. And I could cry now. And I thought, even though it's a story, how many worse stories are there out there? Where you've made friends with someone, and I just can't understand it, to be honest. I can't. If I take it to a higher perspective, I can see things are playing out, but yeah, where I sit right now, I suppose it's really hard for me to comprehend the male mind that thinks there's glory in this. And I've met soldiers who've told me it's not glory at all. It's horrible, but they had to believe in it. One said it was necessary. I found that hard to believe. Maybe from the context of looking at it through the eyes of the men, they see other men as violent, and they believe it's the only way to protect themselves. Because I was thinking about the escalation of arms. But then I was thinking about tonight there was some footage around the Chinese Navy, and I thought, well, who supplied them? So the arms traders. This is not helping. This is not de-escalating the violence. This is actually expanding it. We don't want that. Children and mothers, fathers, grandparents, they are the ones that are in the line of fire here. And, in these war zones, nobody hears about the disabled and the elderly and how they cope. What about those with mental health issues because of the trauma? What about them? Got a little dog looking up at me. It's really hard. We don't know anything. We just see the small little sound bites on television, which is not the true scenario. So going back to what I was saying, I love everyone, and I do. And I care. I care deeply about the children. I don't want to see them losing touch with playing with other kids. I don't want to see them on computers all the time and someone trying to change or shape their behaviour, as they call it. It's not the way to shape their behaviour. Human interaction is extremely important for the human condition, unless you're someone who doesn't care about the human condition, which I believe some don't. I think some people really just see it as using people for their own means, and that's it. Well, I'm just saying that's not the possible future I'm choosing. The possible future I'm choosing is going to be very dynamic, and people are going to find who they are. And we're going to learn to live in peace and harmony with one another as the true nature of humankind, and we are kind. People are actually incredible. There's no ordinary person, not one. They have all these gifts and talents that get suppressed or not utilised because they're too busy doing this and that for others. We've become very selfish. We don't really feel for others. I do. I really want to see them happy. That's why I created Happiness Australia. That's why I created Worldpeacefull. Same thing. So anyway, I will wrap it up there. Sending peace to the world. Sending peace to Silicon Valley, definitely. that something really amazing and wonderful happens to those who are pushing this movement, but in a way that, sort of really inspires another way of seeing they're going to go this path, but do it, with real service in mind for humanity, because you could do some really great things for everyone, but don't control and dominate with it. Invite the world community into this process of smart cities. Talk to the people who have to get their feedback in a real way, or it'll be rejected on one level or another when they realise what's going on. I've just got feeling to go silent for a second, and then I'll finish. Sense is to pause, create a space. If it's not something you're prepared to do for your children, if you don't want your children being plugged in and disconnected from their true happiness, then you need to pause in what you're doing. You can't just say, I don't put my kids on iPads when everybody else's kids are on iPads. You can't do that. It's a CSIRO situation. Don't do to others what you're not prepared to do to your own family. Is this for their highest good? And ask yourself honestly, is it? Or is it about making money? Self-interest. Last revolution before it all collapses. And just talking to that for a moment. I've gone through the Phoenix experience 1,000 times in my life. I've been through a lot to get me to this point. So I've been at hitting rock bottom, had to pull myself up again, back down again, up again. I felt I was being put through the ringer over many years in respect of the conflicts I've had to deal with, which were mindsets that were very pathological. But that experience made me very, very resilient. And what it tells me is when all this collapses, it's okay. It's actually okay. It's a good thing. Because out of that, something better's coming. It's like anything. You relinquish something, something better comes. Life is working for us, not against us. There's nothing to fear about change. I'm not frightened of change. Even this Brave New World scenario, whilst I'm not going that direction, I'm not afraid of it, but I can see the folly in it. And it's very clear to me that this is not going to serve humanity. And I'm here to serve humanity. That's my job, in my way. So with that, your happy destiny is unavoidable. Take care of yourselves. Much love and inspiration. Let's see what happens. Bye.